The briefing hall stank of disinfectant and arrogance. Commander Veshkarn stood at the podium, his forearms crossed in what the Galactic Coalition considered a power stance. To me, it looked like he was trying to hug himself and failing spectacularly. His scales glinted under the harsh lights of the Academy's main auditorium, each one polished to perfection. Because apparently, when you are a decorated officer with 12 campaign ribbons, you have time for a skincare routine. And so, Veshkarn announced, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for explaining fire safety to toddlers, we arrive at the topic of humanity. A ripple of laughter spread through the assembled cadets. 300 students from 40 different species, and they all found this hilarious. The Krellians chittered. The Wehrmacht made their weird gurgling sound that passed for amusement. Even the usually stoic pale ones cracked what might have been smiles on their translucent faces. I sat in the back row, as I always did, watching this circus with growing irritation. Now, I know what you are thinking, Veshkarn continued, warming to his subject like a preacher at a tent revival. How did such a species even survive long enough to develop spaceflight? The answer, my dear cadets, is luck. Pure, dumb, statistical improbability. More laughter. Someone threw a food pellet. The kind of mature behavior you would expect from the Coalition's finest. Humans possess no natural armor. Veshkarn raised one clawed finger. No venom. Another finger. No enhanced strength, speed, or regenerative capabilities. A third finger went up. Their homeworld is a Class 4 death trap with weather patterns that actively try to murder them. They have a single heart, cadets. One cardiovascular pump. If it stops, they die. No backup system. No redundancy. Just death. He paused for effect, letting that sink in. A Wehrmacht cadet named something unpronounceable that translated roughly to blob of enthusiasm raised a tentacle. Commander, if humans are so fragile, why did the Coalition accept them? An excellent question. Veshkarn's inner eyelids flickered with pleasure. The Coalition accepted humanity for the same reason we accept any technologically adolescent species. Pity, resources, and the vague hope that they might, against all odds, contribute something useful before they inevitably destroy themselves. I felt my spine stiffen. I was nth Kal, a species known for our tactical brilliance and our impressive lack of patience for stupidity. But even I could see where this was going, and it was nowhere good. Let me illustrate, Veshkarn said, tapping a control pad on the podium. The holographic display blazed to life, showing a human soldier in standard Coalition combat armor. The figure rotated slowly, giving everyone a good look. This, Veshkarn gestured dramatically, is the human contribution to the Coalition Defense Forces. Note the excessive padding required to protect their easily bruised flesh. Observe the respiratory filters necessary, because their lungs cannot process half the atmospheres we consider normal. And look at the medical monitoring system built into every suit, because humans are so catastrophically breakable that we need constant updates on whether they are still alive. The laughter was louder now, crueler. In combat scenarios, Veshkarn went on, clearly enjoying himself. Human soldiers require twice the support staff of any other species. They need constant hydration, regular sleep cycles, and something they call bathroom breaks, which I will not elaborate on because we are trying to maintain some dignity here. A Krellian in the front row was literally rolling in the aisle. I considered stepping on it. But Commander, another cadet called out, what about their history? Did they not wage war on their own planet for thousands of cycles? Oh, yes. Veshkarn's smile could have cut glass. Humans are exceptional at killing other humans. Put them against actual warriors from species that evolved with natural weapons and survival instincts, and they fold like wet paper. The only reason they have any success stories is because they overwhelm problems with numbers, and a disturbing willingness to die pointlessly. He pulled up another hologram. This one showed casualty statistics from various conflicts. The human numbers were, admittedly, not impressive. In the Battle of Kepler's Edge, human forces sustained 70% casualties within the first hour. At the siege of Proxima Station, they lost an entire battalion because they forgot to account for the station's gravity fluctuations. Forgot, cadets. As if basic physics is optional. I had heard enough. My people value honesty, efficiency, and tactical superiority. What I was witnessing was none of those things. It was bullying dressed up as education, and it was starting to make my skin itch. But I stayed quiet. For now. The point, Veshkarn said, lowering his voice for maximum impact, is that humanity is a cautionary tale. They are proof that determination and stubbornness are not substitutes for actual capability. When you graduate from this academy and take your posts across the coalition fleets, you will encounter humans. You will likely be asked to serve alongside them. My advice? Keep your expectations low and your medical insurance current. The auditorium erupted in applause. Not the polite kind, the enthusiastic, agreement-filled kind that told you the audience was eating this garbage with a spoon. That is when she stood up. I noticed her because everyone else did. The sudden movement in the crowd, the ripple of turning heads, the collective intake of breath that happens when something unexpected occurs. She was human. Obviously. The proportions gave it away even before I saw her face. Humans always looked slightly wrong to me, like someone had designed a sentient species using only the basic template and forgotten to add any interesting features. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, bilateral symmetry. Boring. But this one did not look boring. She looked furious. The cadet uniform fit her like it had been painted on. All crisp lines and polished buttons. Her hair was pulled back in a severe style that probably violated at least 3 regulations, but somehow made her look more dangerous, not less. And her eyes, those weird human eyes with their tiny range of focus and singular visual spectrum, were locked on Veshkarn like targeting lasers. Cadet. Veshkarn's tone shifted from jovial to annoyed in a heartbeat. You have something to say? Yes, sir. Her voice carried across the auditorium without shouting. A neat trick. I have several things to say. Then, by all means, enlighten us. Veshkarn made a show of settling back against the podium. Share your wisdom, human, the way he said that last word. Like it was an insult. Like just being human was something to apologize for. The cadet stepped into the aisle, and I got my first clear look at her face. She was young, probably barely past whatever age humans considered adult. Her jaw was set in that particular way that meant someone was about to do something either very brave or very stupid. Often both. My name, she said clearly, is Kira Vale. I am a third-year tactical student with a focus on hostile environment combat. My current rank in the class standings is 7th out of 300. My species is human. And everything you just said, Commander, is a lie. The silence that followed was spectacular. You could have heard a feather fall in a vacuum. Veshkarn's scales darkened, which in his species indicated either extreme anger or a sudden drop in blood pressure. Given the circumstances, I was betting on anger. Cadet Vale, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. You are out of line. No, sir. Kira took another step forward. With respect, you are out of facts. Oh, this was going to be good. I leaned forward in my seat, suddenly grateful I had chosen the back row. Better view of the impending disaster. You want to talk about human fragility? Kira continued, her voice gaining strength. Let us talk about it. Yes, we have one heart. We also have a cardiovascular system so efficient that we can maintain pursuit of prey for hours without stopping. Our ancestors literally ran animals to death on our home world. We call it persistence hunting. Veshkarn opened his mouth to interrupt, But Kira was not finished. You mentioned our lack of natural armor. Fair point. We compensate by being the only species in the coalition that regularly survives falls from heights that would paste most of you against the ground. Human bones break, Commander, but they also heal stronger than before. We are the only species that gets tougher from being damaged. A few cadets shifted uncomfortably. The laughter had died completely now. No venom? Kira's smile was sharp enough to cut. We do not need venom. We have something better. We have spite. We have the biological capacity to ignore pain that would incapacitate any other species. Humans have continued fighting with limbs severed, organs exposed, and pain levels that would send your soldiers into shock comas. You are describing madness, not military capability. Am I? Kira reached down to her belt. Every security sensor in the auditorium probably lit up at once. Then let me show you something else we have. She drew her blade. Not a standard-issue training weapon, not a ceremonial decoration, a real, honest to whatever gods you believed in, combat knife. The kind that came with a warranty, measured in bodies, not years. The metal caught the light as she held it up, and I saw something etched along the flat of the blade. Symbols. Human writing. Probably something poetic about death and glory. Humans were weird about that stuff. This, Kira said, her voice carrying to every corner of the now deathly silent auditorium, belonged to my great-grandmother. She carried it on Earth during something we called World War II. Then, my grandmother carried it during the Mars Rebellion. Then, my mother carried it during the First Contact Wars. Now, I carry it. She turned the blade slowly, letting everyone see it. 4 generations of human women, Commander. 4 generations who fought and bled and survived things that would have ended stronger species. And do you know what the common factor was? Veshkarn did not answer. He looked like he was calculating the distance to the nearest security panel. We refused to die when we were supposed to, Kira said simply. That is what humans do. We look at the universe and its rules and its expectations, and we say, no thank you. We get back up when we should stay down. We fight when we should surrender. We survive when survival should be mathematically impossible. She took another step forward. Veshkarn took a step back. You want to know why the coalition accepted humanity? It was not pity, Commander. It was fear. It was the realization that if you did not bring us into the fold, we would eventually show up anyway, and it would be a lot messier for everyone involved. The blade twirled in her hand, a casual display of skill that sent another ripple through the crowd. Humans might not have natural weapons, but they had been making artificial ones for millennia, and it showed. Let me tell you about Kepler's Edge, Kira said, her voice taking on a storytelling quality that made my spine tingle. The battle you mentioned, 70% casualties in the first hour. What you did not mention was that the human forces were holding a position against an enemy that outnumbered them 20-1. That 70% died buying time for an evacuation that saved 300,000 civilians from 14 different species. She paused, letting that sink in. Or should we talk about Proxima Station? The battalion that forgot about gravity fluctuations? Those soldiers did not forget anything, Commander. They deliberately triggered a cascade failure in the station's gravity generators to collapse an entire wing on an enemy force. It was a suicide mission. They knew it. They did it anyway. And they won. Veshkarn's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish. It was remarkably satisfying to watch. You stand there, Kira continued, her voice hardening, with your fancy scales and your multiple hearts and your backup organs, and you mock us for being fragile. But you know what we have that you do not? She raised the knife higher. We have nothing to lose. And there it was, the thing that made humans dangerous. Not their technology, not their numbers, not even their weird ability to eat poison for fun and call it spicy food. It was the fact that they genuinely did not seem to care about the odds. When you have one heart, Kira said softly. You learn to use it well. When you have thin skin, you learn to hit first, and hit hard. When your planet spends millions of years trying to kill you, you learn to kill back. That is humanity, Commander. We are the species that looked at a universe full of things bigger, stronger, and meaner than us, and decided we would rather die standing than live kneeling. She sheathed the knife in one smooth motion. The click of it, settling into the scabbard, echoed like a gunshot. So the next time you want to lecture a room full of cadets about human weakness, Kira said, her voice returning to something approaching normal volume, maybe remember that we are the species that weaponized persistence, turned stubbornness into a survival trait, and made an art form out of refusing to accept reality. She turned to face the assembled students, and I saw something in her expression that made me reassess everything I thought I knew about humans. We are not here because the prize. Coalition took pity on us, she said to the crowd. We are here because we earned it, in blood, in sacrifice, and in 1,000 battles where we should have lost, but somehow did not. And if any of you believe otherwise, her hand rested on the knife hilt again. Feel free to test that theory. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. 300 cadets from 40 species, and not one of them wanted to be the first to challenge that statement. Veshkarn had gone from dark purple to a pale green, which in his species indicated either extreme fear or indigestion, possibly both. Cadet Vale, he finally managed, his voice strangled. You are dismissed. Report to my office immediately after this session. Yes, sir. Kira snapped off a perfect salute, crisp and clean, and loaded with just enough insolence to be noticeable. Then she turned and walked up the aisle, her boots clicking against the floor in a steady rhythm. She passed my row, and for just a second, our eyes met. She winked. Then she was gone, the door hissing shut behind her, leaving 300 stunned cadets and one mortified commander in her wake. The silence stretched and stretched. And finally, someone started clapping. It was me. I could not help myself. The whole display had been magnificent. Others joined in, slowly at first, then building to a crescendo. Not everyone. The Krellian, who had been laughing earlier, looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. But enough cadets applauded that it felt like a shift in the air, like something had fundamentally changed in the last 5 minutes. Veshkarn slammed his hand on the podium, and the sound system amplified it into a thunderclap. Dismissed! He roared. All of you! Get out! We got out. But as I filed through the doors with the rest of the crowd, I heard the whispers starting. Speculation about Kira Vale, questions about human combat doctrine, sudden interest in a species that had been dismissed as cannon fodder just minutes before. One cadet, a pale one, named something I could not pronounce, turned to his companion. Do you think she was serious? About the knife? About which part? His friend replied. The part where it has been in her family for 4 generations, or the part where she is absolutely willing to use it? Both. Then yes, I think she was very serious. I had to agree. There had been something in Kira Vale's eyes, something that went beyond academy bravado or youthful defiance. It was the look of someone who came from a long line of survivors, and who had no intention of being the one to break that chain. As I headed toward my next class, I found myself thinking about human history. Not the sanitized version they taught in xenobiology, but the real thing. The messy, violent, improbable story of a species that should have died out a dozen times, but kept finding ways to cheat extinction. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that consumed their entire planet. They had looked at the vacuum of space and decided it was just another challenge to overcome. They had taken their soft bodies and their single hearts and their ridiculous fragility, and they had turned those weaknesses into weapons. And now they were here, in the coalition, serving alongside species that could crush them without effort. But somehow, impossibly, they kept pace, kept contributing, kept refusing to be the weak link everyone expected them to be. I reached my tactical analysis class and slid into my seat, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept seeing that knife, the way Kira had held it, like it was an extension of her arm, like it was part of her story, her identity, her refusal to be anything less than dangerous. The instructor started droning on about fleet formations and defensive perimeters, but I was not listening. I was thinking about Kepler's Edge and Proxima Station and all the other battles where humans had been written off as liabilities and had somehow turned themselves into assets. I was thinking about persistence, hunting and broken bones, healing stronger, and the kind of spite that could keep you fighting when every logical part of your brain was screaming at you to quit. I was thinking that maybe, just maybe, Commander Veshkarn had been right about one thing. Humans were a cautionary tale, just not the kind he thought they were. They were a warning to the rest of us. A reminder that natural advantages meant nothing if you did not have the will to use them. That armor and venom and backup hearts were all well and good, but they could make you soft, complacent, convinced of your own superiority right up until something smaller and meaner and infinitely more stubborn put a knife in your gut. The class ended. I gathered my materials and headed out into the corridor, still lost in thought. That is when I heard the commotion. The corridor outside the tactical analysis classroom had transformed into something resembling a small riot. Not the violent kind, thankfully. More the gawking, gossip-spreading, everyone trying to see something interesting kind. About 40 cadets were clustered around something, and the noise level suggested either someone was giving away free food or something genuinely noteworthy was happening. I pushed through the crowd, using my superior height and general lack of concern for personal space to get a better view. There, in the center of the mob, stood Kira Vale, and she was not alone. 3 cadets surrounded her, forming a loose triangle that anyone with basic tactical training would recognize as a containment formation. 2 Krellians and a Wehrmacht heavy class, each one significantly larger than the human. The kind of size difference that usually ended conversations before they started. The Wehrmacht was doing the talking. His name was Torg, and I knew him by reputation. 3rd-generation military family, top marks in close combat, and the kind of personality that made you want to punch him in whatever species equivalent he had for a face. So, the little human has claws, Torg gurgled, his translator rendering his native language into something approximating standard. Very impressive speech back there. Very inspiring. Now, how about you back it up? Kira stood perfectly still, her arms relaxed at her sides, her expression neutral. But I noticed her weight was balanced on the balls of her feet, ready to move in any direction. Combat stance disguised as casual posture. Smart. I have nothing to prove to you, she said calmly. My record speaks for itself. Your record? How remarkable. I am 5th. Torg here is 3rd. Shall we discuss the statistical improbability of a human outperforming either of us in actual combat? We could, Kira replied, but statistics are boring. If you want to challenge me, just say so. Stop dancing around it like nervous hatchlings. Oh, that was not going to help. The Krellian's chitin darkened, which meant he was either embarrassed or angry. Probably both. Torg extended one massive appendage, not quite touching Kira, but close enough to be threatening. The training arena? 20 minutes? Unless you would rather apologize to Commander Veshkarn and admit you were out of line? I will meet you there, Kira said without hesitation. But I will not be apologizing to anyone. The crowd murmured. This was escalating fast, and I was not entirely sure I wanted to see where it ended. Unauthorized combat challenges were technically against Academy regulations, but they happened with enough frequency that the instructors usually turned a blind eye unless someone got seriously injured. And given the size difference here, serious injury seemed likely. Torg and his companions withdrew, satisfied they had made their point. The crowd began to disperse, already spreading the news through whatever communication networks cadets use to gossip these days. I caught up with Kira as she headed toward her quarters, presumably to prepare. That was unnecessarily provocative, I told her. She glanced at me, one eyebrow raised. And you are? Raxith. Third-year tactical, same as you. Currently ranked 9th, which means you are directly above me in standings, and I have a professional interest in whether you survive the next hour. How mercenary of you. I prefer pragmatic. I fell into step beside her. You do realize Torg outweighs you by at least 60 kilograms? And that his species has natural armor plating that your knife will barely scratch? 73 kilograms, Kira corrected. I checked his file. And yes, I am aware of the armor situation. Then you are either very confident or very stupid. Why not both? She flashed me a grin that was equal parts humor and danger. Besides, I am not planning to use the knife. That stopped me. Then what exactly is your strategy? Show up and see. We reached her quarters, and she palmed the entry pad. The door slid open, revealing a space that was remarkably sparse, even by academy standards. A sleeping platform, a small desk covered in data pads, and weapons. So many weapons. Not all of them were regulation issue. Kira moved to a locker and began pulling out gear. Light armor, the kind designed for mobility rather than protection. Wrist guards with suspicious-looking modifications. And something that looked like brass knuckles crossed with a taser. Shock knuckles, she explained, catching my stare. Technically legal for training purposes. Technically. You are going to electrocute him? Only if he makes me. She strapped on the armor with practiced efficiency. Look, I appreciate the concern truly, but I have been underestimated my entire life. My grandmother was underestimated. My mother was underestimated. At some point, you get tired of proving yourself over and over, and you start looking for creative solutions. Creative solutions that involve possibly giving Torg cardiac arrest. His species has 3 hearts. He will be fine. She paused, considering. Probably. I watched her finish gearing up, and something occurred to me. This is not about Torg, is it? This is about Veshkarn. Kira's hands stilled for just a moment. Then she continued fastening her wrist guards. Veshkarn is a symptom, not the disease. He represents every instructor, every commanding officer, every tactical analyst who looks at human forces and sees expendable assets instead of soldiers. This fight is about changing that perception. By beating Torg into unconsciousness? By showing that humans do not need size or natural weapons to be dangerous? We just need opportunity and a willingness to take risks that would make sane species run screaming. She stood, fully armored now, and checked her chronometer. 15 minutes. I should get to the arena. Mind if I come watch? Why? Because, I admitted, if you actually pull this off, it will be the most interesting thing to happen at this academy in 3 years. And if you fail spectacularly, I want to be able to say, I warned you. Fair enough. She headed for the door, then paused. Raxith? Yes? Thank you for not trying to talk me out of it. Would it have worked? Not even slightly. We made our way to the training arena, picking up a following as we went. Word had spread fast, and by the time we arrived, at least 100 cadets had gathered. Someone had even set up an illegal betting pool, with odds heavily favoring Torg. The arena itself was a standard combat space, 50 meters square with variable terrain settings, currently configured as a flat surface with minimal obstacles. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. Just open space and whatever skills you brought with you. Torg was already there, surrounded by his supporters. He had stripped down to his natural armor, which gleamed under the arena lights like polished stone. Beside him, the 2 Krellians were making a show of warming up, their segmented limbs moving through complex kata patterns. Kira walked to the center of the arena alone. No supporters, no backup, just her and whatever plan she had cooked up in that stubborn human brain. An instructor appeared at the edge of the combat space. Not Veshkarn, thankfully. This was Lieutenant Zen, a pale one who taught hand-to-hand combat and had the distinction of never showing any emotion whatsoever. "This is a voluntary training exercise," Zen announced in his flat, effectless voice. "Standard arena rules apply. Fight continues until one participant yields, is incapacitated, or I determine the risk of permanent injury is too high. Medical team is standing by. Are both participants ready?" "Ready?" Torg rumbled. Kira just nodded. "Begin." Torg moved first, which was his first mistake. For all his size and strength, he was predictable. He charged straight at Kira, probably planning to use his mass advantage to simply overwhelm her. She waited until he was 3 meters away, then dropped to a slide, using her momentum to carry her under his guard and past him. As she passed, her shock knuckles made contact with the back of his knee joint. The electrical discharge was not huge, but it was enough. Torg's legs spasmed, and his charge became a stumble. He caught himself before falling, but Kira was already moving again, circling to keep him turning. "Cute trick," Torg growled. "That will not work twice." He was right, so Kira did not try it twice. Instead, she threw something small and metallic that bounced off his chest armor harmlessly. Torg looked down at it, confused. Then looked up at Kira, who was smiling. The flashbang went off. I had to give Torg credit. Despite being temporarily blinded and deafened, he still managed to swing at where Kira had been standing. Would have been an impressive hit if she had not already moved 5 meters to his left. "That is cheating!" one of the Krellians shouted. "That is tactics!" Someone else yelled back. Might have been me. I was getting invested in this. Kira did not waste her advantage. While Torg was still recovering, she moved in close, using her smaller size to stay inside his reach, where his powerful strikes were less effective. Her shock knuckles found gaps in his armor, delivering small jolts that disrupted his nervous system without causing real damage. It was like watching a persistence hunter in action. She was not trying to take him down with one big hit. She was wearing him down, forcing him to work harder, to waste energy on attacks that did not connect. Torg caught on eventually. He stopped trying to hit her and instead focused on corralling her, using his bulk to cut off escape routes. It was smarter than his initial charge, and for a moment, I thought Kira had miscalculated. Then she jumped, not away from him, at him. She used his armored shoulder as a springboard, launching herself up and over, twisting in mid-air to land behind him. As she passed over his head, her shock knuckles made contact with the base of his skull. This was not a small jolt. This was everything her modified weapons could deliver in a single burst. Torg went down like a demolished building. Not unconscious, but definitely not capable of standing either. His limbs twitched spasmodically as his nervous system tried to remember how to function. Kira landed in a crouch, breathing hard but still ready to fight. Lieutenant Zen stepped forward. Torg is incapacitated. Kira Vale wins. The arena erupted in noise. Cheering, shouting, the sound of bets being settled and credits changing hands. The Krellians were protesting, claiming the shock knuckles were illegal, but Zen silenced them with a look. "The weapons were approved for training use," he stated flatly. "The victory stands." Kira stood slowly, helping Torg to his feet once his nervous system had rebooted enough for him to stand. To his credit, he did not immediately attack her again. He just stared at her with something that might have been respect. "How?" he asked simply. "Physics," Kira replied. "Leverage, timing, and the willingness to take risks. Also, I studied your previous fights. You favor charging tactics and rely too much on your armor. Once I knew that, the rest was just execution. I underestimated you. Everyone does." She extended a hand. "No hard feelings?" Torg looked at her hand, then at her face. Then, slowly, he reached out and clasped her hand in his massive appendage. No hard feelings. But next time, I will be prepared. Next time, I will use different tactics. They broke apart, and the crowd surged forward. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to Kira, to congratulate her, to ask how she had done it. The same cadets who had been laughing at humanity an hour ago were now treating her like a celebrity. I hung back, watching the circus. Kira handled it well, accepting congratulations without gloating, answering questions without giving away all her secrets. She was playing the political game now, and she was better at it than I expected. Eventually, the crowd dispersed, leaving just a core group of cadets gathered around Kira. I noticed they were from different species, different backgrounds, but they all shared one thing. They were all ranked in the bottom half of the class, the ones who constantly got overlooked and underestimated. One of them, a small pale one named Vix, spoke up. That was incredible. Could you teach us? I mean, not the specific tactics, but the approach. How to fight when you are smaller, weaker, disadvantaged. Kira considered this. I could, but it would not be easy. Everything I know, I learned from people who refused to quit, even when quitting made sense. It requires a certain level of crazy. We can be crazy, Vix insisted. We have been getting crushed in training exercises for 2 years. I would very much like to start doing the crushing. A murmur of agreement from the others. Kira looked at me. What do you think, Raxith? Should I start an unofficial study group for the tactically challenged? I think, I said carefully, that you just changed the dynamic of this entire academy. Whether that is good or bad remains to be seen. So that is a yes? That is a proceed with caution, and let me know when the first session is, so I can watch. She grinned. Deal. We left the arena together, the small group of cadets trailing behind like ducklings. I could already see the wheels turning in their heads, imagining new possibilities, new ways to approach problems they had thought were unsolvable. That is when Commander Veshkarn stepped into our path. He looked terrible. His scales had lost their polish, his posture was hunched, and his eyes held the particular desperation of someone whose worldview had been thoroughly shattered. Cadet Vale, he said, his voice rough. My office. Now. Yes, sir? Kira turned to the group. I will contact you all later. Do not practice anything stupid without supervision. She followed Veshkarn down the corridor, leaving the rest of us to speculate about what was about to happen. I gave it about 30 seconds before curiosity overwhelmed my sense of self-preservation. Then I followed them, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to potentially overhear something interesting. Veshkarn's office was exactly what you would expect from a career military officer with too much ego and too little imagination. Awards covered the walls, commendations were displayed in cases, and everything was arranged to project maximum authority. Through the door, which was not quite closed all the way, I could hear voices. Do you have any idea what you have done? Veshkarn demanded. Won a training bout? Kira suggested. You humiliated me, in front of 300 cadets. My reputation, my authority, everything I have built here has been undermined by your little stunt. Your reputation undermined itself when you decided to use your position to mock an entire species. I just highlighted the problem. A crash. Probably. Veshkarn hitting his desk. You think you are clever. You think one victory against an overconfident cadet proves something about humanity. But you are wrong, Vale. You are an outlier, an exception. One talented human does not change the statistical reality. Then let me show you another statistical reality. Kira's voice was calm, almost gentle. Since humans joined the Coalition Defense Forces 15 years ago, survival rates for mixed species units have increased by 22%. Mission success rates are up 18%. And casualty rates among non-human soldiers have decreased by 31% when working alongside human units. Silence. Want to know why? Kira continued. Because humans are really, really good at keeping people alive. We have had to be. Our entire evolutionary history was about barely surviving, so we got creative. We developed better tactics, better medicine, better support structures, and when we joined the coalition, we brought all that experience with us. That is, I have not seen those numbers. Because nobody bothered to compile them, too busy focusing on how many humans die instead of how many non-humans we save. But I did the research, Commander. It is all in the public record, if you care to look. Another silence, longer this time. Why? Veshkarn asked finally. Why go through all this? The confrontation, the fight, the challenge to my authority. What were you trying to accomplish? Change, Kira said simply. Every human serving in the coalition deals with what you put on display today. The assumption that we are weak, that we are liabilities, that we are only here because someone took pity on us. And it affects how we are deployed, how we are treated, and how many of us die in situations we should never have been placed in. So you thought embarrassing a senior officer would fix that? No. I thought demonstrating the gap between perception and reality might start a conversation. And judging by the crowd at that training bout, I was right. People are talking, Commander. They are questioning assumptions they never thought to question before. That is progress. I heard Veshkarn exhale, a long, tired sound. You are right. About the numbers, about the assumptions. I allowed my personal biases to color my teaching, and that was wrong. But Vale, you have to understand, this puts me in an impossible position. If I let your insubordination slide, I lose all credibility. But if I punish you, I look petty. Then do not do either, Kira suggested. Use me. Put me and my unofficial study group to work. Let us train the bottom-ranked cadets, the ones who are struggling. If human tactics and persistence can help them succeed, that proves the point better than any speech. Veshkarn considered this. I could practically hear the gears turning. That is, actually, not a terrible idea. But there would be conditions. You would report directly to me. No unauthorized weapons modifications. And if this fails, if your students do not show measurable improvement, you face a formal disciplinary hearing. Agreed. And Vale? One more thing. Yes, sir? That speech you gave, about humanity refusing to die when they should. You meant every word, did you not? Every single one. Then prove it. Show me that humans are more than just stubborn survivors. Show me they are teachers, leaders, innovators. Show me they belong here. I will, sir. Count on it. I retreated before they could catch me, eavesdropping, my mind racing. This was bigger than one cadet proving a point. This was about changing an entire culture, shifting perceptions that had been cemented over years, and somehow, impossibly, it seemed to be working. Over the following weeks, Kira's study group grew. What started as a handful of struggling cadets became a movement. She taught them human tactics, human persistence, and most importantly, human refusal to accept limitations. The results were undeniable. Cadets who had been failing combat simulations were now passing. Students who had been dead last in rankings were climbing steadily upward. And it was not just about fighting techniques. Kira taught them strategy, adaptability, the art of winning by refusing to lose. I attended a few sessions myself, officially as an observer, but mostly because I wanted to understand what made this work. What I found was not complicated. Kira simply believed in her students when nobody else did. She saw potential where others saw failure, and she gave them tools to succeed. Very human, very effective. The Academy administration noticed. How could they not? When 40 cadets suddenly started performing above their predicted levels, questions were asked. Studies were commissioned, and slowly, reluctantly, people started to admit that maybe humanity had something valuable to contribute after all. Commander Veshkarn, to his credit, kept his word. He supported the program, provided resources, and even began incorporating some of Kira's teaching methods into his own classes. His lectures on humanity changed too. Less mockery, more respect. Not perfect, but better. On graduation day, 6 months after that infamous briefing, I stood in the auditorium watching Kira Vale receive her diploma. She had finished third in the final rankings, behind only 2 cadets who had years of specialized training. But more importantly, she had changed minds, shifted perspectives, proved that determination and stubbornness were not substitutes for capability. They were capabilities in themselves. As she walked across the stage, I noticed something. Half the assembled cadets were standing, applauding louder than protocol required. These were her students, her converts, the ones who had learned that being underestimated was not a weakness. It was an opportunity. Kira caught my eye as she left the stage, and she smiled. Not the dangerous smile from before. She had done it. Against impossible odds, with nothing but her training and her heritage and her absolute refusal to back down, she had changed the coalition's perception of humanity. One speech, one fight, one stubborn cadet who refused to accept the lie. And somewhere in the galaxy, I imagined her grandmother and her great-grandmother smiling. Their legacy lived on in Kira Vale, and through her, in every human serving in the Coalition Defense Forces. They were still fragile, still had only one heart and thin skin and no natural weapons. But they were warriors anyway, and that, I had learned, made all the difference. The ceremony ended. We filed out into the bright sunlight of graduation day, ready to take our places across the Coalition fleets. I knew I would be seeing Kira Vale again, probably on some distant battlefield where her particular brand of stubbornness would make the difference between victory and defeat. I found myself looking forward to it, because if there was one thing humans had taught me, it was this. Never count someone out just because the odds are against them. Sometimes the odds are wrong, and sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove.